Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mengs, and today I welcome you guys to the start of a brand new series which a lot of you guys have been asking for in the comment section. I get a lot of questions from people wondering if I can do a video format where I really analyze certain units from Advanced Wars and take a look at their abilities, their strengths, their weaknesses, what they can do, what they cannot do, when they should be deployed, when they shouldn't be deployed, and also take a look at many of their hidden rare qualities. Each unit in Advanced Wars actually has many hidden qualities to them, which the game does not tell you about. And I even discovered a few bits of really obscure trivia that I was not aware of prior to making this series, and I bet that the thing I'm about to reveal at the end of this video is something that most of you guys had no idea about. So definitely stay tuned for that. Now, the unit which we'll be kicking off the series with today is the Missile. I figured the Missile was the perfect unit because it's kind of become a bit of a meme lately in my streams. People get very excited when they see missiles being deployed. They draw fan art of Missile-chan, which is kind of funny. So why has the Missile turned into such a meme in my fandom? I think it has something to do with the fact that it's not very frequently seen. And obscurity tends to turn things into memes. And if we were to make a ground chart of every single unit deployed from bases, I think the Missile would be somewhere near the bottom in terms of how often it is seen. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's also at the bottom in the deployment order in the base itself. Now, why is that? Well, the Missile is a ground-to-air vehicle indirect unit. If I were to describe it in a few words, it would probably be a rocket that can shoot on air. And it does this very well. It does a lot of damage. It practically one-shots every single air unit in the game. Against battle and transport copters, the Missile does so much damage that even if the enemy has some defense, or even if the Missile is a little bit injured, it should still be enough to shoot the unit down in one go. It does 120% base damage, which is a lot. That is before any kinds of firepower increases or anything like that. Even against fighters and bombers, it does 100%, meaning it can shoot them down in a single volley. And this is very cost effective because it's practically worth half their price. So whenever you can shoot down a fighter or a bomber with a Missile, it has instantly earned itself in cost-wise, which is very strong. However, the Missile also has a lot of weaknesses. I think one of the most glaring ones is the fact that it has a very poor minimum range. It has a minimum range of 2. And this means that even when you have two missiles together like this, it's very easy to find overlapping minimum ranges where they cannot shoot. So if battlecopters, for example, get close to them, they can easily position themselves in such a way that they can't be targeted at all. And of course, if a battlecopter gets close to a missile, it completely annihilates it, making the Missile practically worthless. Now, if we take the same situation with the anti-air, if the battlecopter is stupid enough to attack that, then it gets completely annihilated on the counterattack, because the anti-air is a ground direct unit. Now, speaking of the anti-air, I think a lot of people would say that the anti-air does its job a lot better than the Missile. The Missile is a lot less expensive than the rocket. It only costs 12,000 to the rocket's 15, but it costs a lot more than the anti-air, which only costs 8,000. So a lot of people prefer to build anti-air over missiles, and understandably so. Even in terms of range, which is supposed to be the Missile's strong point, we can see that the anti-air actually covers a much wider surface area compared to the Missile. Now, of course, this is granted if the anti-air is on open terrain. You know, if we add in mountains, rivers, and forests to the mix, then obviously the anti-air becomes a lot less viable. But on open terrain like this, we can actually see that the anti-air covers a much larger surface area than the Missile for a much lower price. And on top of that, it's not even weak against battlecopters. And on top of that, the anti-air also has the ability to take out infantry with ease. It can even take engagements against tanks if it really needs to. It's not optimal, but it can, unlike the Missile, which can only shoot on air units. So it's very specialized compared to the anti-air and a lot more expensive. But I hear a lot of you guys saying, but Manx, you're supposed to hide the missiles in forests. And I agree, this is definitely one of the things you should aim to do in Fog of War. But then comes the Missile's next weakness, and that is its poor mobility. This is perhaps one of its worst traits. Compared to the rocket, which has a movement of 5, missiles have a movement of 4, making them the slowest unit in the game, except for mechs and infantry. At least the slowest vehicle in the game by far. It is actually as slow as the Mega Tank from Dual Strike, so that should tell you something. Additionally, the missile moves on tires, which is the worst movement type in Advanced Wars. Tires can pretty much only move on roads unimpeded, roads and properties. Planes causes them to pay 2 movement cost per movement, and if they want to move into forests, they have to expand 3 movement costs. So the missile can only move a single tile through forests in a given turn. And this is a problem because it means that setting up a missile takes a long time. Even if you have roads to move it along, it still takes a long time to get into the position it needs to be in. And by the time you see enemy battlecopters, you definitely want a response as quickly as possible. You don't have time to spend 4 to 5 days getting a missile to where it needs to be. And then when you finally get it into position, the battlecopter can just fly away anyway. So in this situation, the anti-air is definitely a lot better than the missile. Now, if you can get the missile into a forest and hide it, sure, it becomes very strong. But as soon as your opponent sees that there's a missile somewhere shooting down your air units, they're going to pull that air unit away. So even if you get a missile into an advantageous position, chances are you're going to have to relocate it at some point, unless you're playing against a stupid AI who will just continuously send air units into its range. A human player will not make that mistake. So we've talked a lot about why the missile is a pretty bad unit, but let's talk about some of its strengths, because it does have some. I think one of the first things people will tend to notice is the fact that the missile has an insane vision range in Fog of War. It has a vision range of 5, which is as much as a recon. This doesn't mean that the missile is a good scout by any means, because it's still slow and you still don't want to put it anywhere near the front lines, and a recon definitely does this job a lot better than the missile. But what it means is that the missile is able to guard its own area. Unlike a rocket or artillery, which are completely reliant on support to spot enemy units in order to be able to attack, the missile has no such weaknesses. The missile has as much vision range as it has range, so it can completely cover its own surface area without any external support. So if you have a missile in a remote location to keep watch, like if you're expecting some air units to come its way, then you can leave it completely on its own. Granted, it won't get taken out by battlecopters, that's a weakness that it definitely has, but a missile can basically stand watch and cover its own area, which is very nice. And this means that in Fog of War, they do have some merit. I would never deploy a missile primarily for scouting, but I would maybe deploy a missile in an area where I want more vision and I know that there might be air units walking about. If you're playing with Gritch, or if you're playing with any CO where you're building up a wall of indirects, having a missile at the center of your indirect blob can be very strong, because it allows the missile to scout ahead for all the other indirects. So this is definitely something that you can consider doing. But just remember that in any other situation, a recon is definitely the superior scout. You don't want to build a vision or a missile just to scout. That's definitely a waste of money. But this is a good quality that it has that many people tend to overlook. There are also some other things which allows a missile to really be good, and that's the fact that if you can get them within range of an airport, you can completely lock down that airport. Because if you get a missile in such a range where it can just shoot down any air unit that comes out of an airport, then that airport becomes completely unusable, because any unit that comes out of it will get one shot. Now, if you're playing against the AI, this is quite hilarious, because the AI doesn't know this. So the AI will just continuously pump out air units out of his airport, losing valuable economy, and you can basically lock down most AI players this way. A human player will only make this mistake once. They'll build the air unit, they'll see that it gets shot down, they'll stop, and they'll try to find the missile before they can build any more units. There's not a lot of maps in which you will realistically be able to pull this off, but there are some smaller maps where it can be done. And if you can get it done, it can be quite hilarious. Another thing which I'd say the missile does better is if you're going into the late game and there's a lot of bombers flying about, if there's a heavy air-dominated game, anti-air can actually start to get pretty weak if there's a lot of bombers around, because as you can see right here, bombers actually do very decently to anti-air on roads. They have about a 50-50 chance of completely wiping them out. And when this happens, anti-air can actually be taken down very easily. And in this situation, missiles can actually be kinda decent. Now, of course, there's another unit which does this way better, and that's the fighter. You know, if you're playing a high economy match with a lot of money on both sides and your opponent is building bombers, then yeah, you definitely want to build a fighter to counteract those bombers, but maybe you won't always have the economy for that. And in that situation, missiles can sometimes be decent against bombers if you can set them up in proper locations. It's just a small little thing. I wouldn't say that this happens a lot, but it can happen sometimes. So, those are pretty much all the strengths and weaknesses of the missile. But I actually have another bit of very obscure trivia for you guys, which I very much doubt many of you are aware of. And that's the fact that the missile has a great resistance to vehicle machine guns. So, in terms of survivability, the missile is obviously not very durable. It has about the same survivability as a rocket. If we take a tank here, we can see that both of them take 85% damage, which is, very devastating. Same thing with the mech. The mech will pretty much wipe them out instantly. We can see that the artillery... Oh, whoops, I actually attacked. That was not what I wanted to do, but it actually doesn't matter. As long as the missile actually isn't dead, I'll be able to demonstrate this. So as you can see right here, the infantry does the same amount of damage as well. Even the anti-air does the same amount of damage, 55 to 55. However, the recon, for whatever reason, does far less damage to the missile than the rocket. Against the rocket, the recon does 55% damage. But against the missile, the recon does 28. That's half. I don't know why this is, but the same thing applies to machine guns fired by vehicles, aka the tank's secondary weapons. Of course, tanks will never fire with their machine guns on vehicles unless they're out of ammo, so I actually had to drain this tank of ammo like this. So we have to actually get rid of all the ammo to demonstrate my point. But it turns out that in addition to recons being weak, tanks with their machine guns also do far less damage to missiles than they do to rockets. So as you can see here, 55% to 30%. Now, of course, you'll almost never see this, but it's still worth pointing out, and the same thing applies to medium tanks and neo-tanks. They do far less damage with their machine guns to missiles than they do to rockets. So how is this applicable in any way? Like, does this actually help you out? It can actually be a little bit relevant in some matches, because recons are very often built against grits to hard counter his recons, or hard counter his rockets, because recons are fast, they have a lot of vision, and if they can close the distance with rockets, they are very good against them. But if you're deploying missiles, you can put your missiles in front of the rockets to shield them against recons, because they'll take a lot less damage, as you can see right here. So again, it's a very obscure piece of trivia, but it's something that I just wanted to include in this video because I don't really know why it's like this. I don't know why vehicle machine guns would be less effective at dealing with missiles, but they are for some reason. So again, I told you guys I would be revealing some weird bits of trivia for you guys. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about missiles. Again, they're kind of overpriced. I would say that they are not worth it. But there are certainly situations in which they can be worth it, although those situations tend to be very few. But I'd like to hear from you guys now. What do you guys think about the missile? Do you think that there are any ways they could be balanced for multiplayer battle? I personally think that if they were worth 10,000, they'd be a lot better. Alternatively, I also think they should have one extra move. They were actually buffed in Days of Ruin. In Days of Ruin, their range got increased by 1. Making them as powerful as battleships in terms of range. They got 3 to 6 instead of 3 to 5. So they definitely recognized that the missiles were a bit underpowered in Days of Ruin. But I doubt this is going to be the case once the reboot camp comes out. I think they will be exactly like they are in Advanced Wars 2, which is a shame because I don't think they'll be used all that much. But do you think missiles should be buffed? Are they a unit which should be more prevalent in the metagame? Or do you think it's okay to have them be kind of like an obscure unit? Let me know about it in the comment section below. And let me know which unit you'd like me to cover in the next installment of this series. I have a lot of things to say about the various units in this game, so let me know in the comment section below, and I'll get to it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed the series or not, and give it a like if you did, and subscribe for more Advanced Wars content. My name is Mengs, and I shall see you guys next time. Bye-bye.